I am I'm in on the island of Saipan today. It's uh it's going to be a really busy day, and I don't have a ton of time. Of course, it's still dark. It's about 5:40 in the morning, and so we'll get sunrise here in just a minute. I realize I shouldn't have worn a black T-shirt because I kind of look like a floating head out here, but I'll have to do the best I can. I got a bunch of things I wanted to talk about, but the first thing I wanted to say is that today we're going to be going over to the island of Tinian and making a pretty amazing little short documentary that you're going to want to definitely see. And we'll be putting those kind of videos out first over at chuckholton.com and then later on YouTube. So if you're a member at chuckholton.com, you can get access to the stuff that we're doing out here sooner than you can if you are just watching on YouTube. Either way, you're going to love it. And I can't wait to get over there and do this. We had an amazing day yesterday here on Saipan, going around and looking at some of the World War II sort of history all over this island. Just very somber when you think about the price that was paid in American blood and the Japanese who died, even the civilians in these battles. It's just mind blowing. You see that kind of stuff, but Americans and civilized countries these days don't have the stomach for the kind of fighting that they had to go through in World War II. And you really get a sense for that, that we were in this to 100% win the war. And that there was no negotiations. There was no ceasefire. We were in it to make Japan capitulate unconditionally, 100%. And we sacrificed tens of thousands of our finest young men in these battles over here just to take volcanic rocks. But because we knew we had to do that in order to get to the end of the war. You know, one of the things that really makes me kind of sick is when you see comments from people about, well, the United States is the only country that's ever used a nuclear weapon, as if that makes us the bad guy. The United States did not want to have to use a nuclear weapon. We didn't want to have to make a nuclear weapon. It would have been great if we lived in a world where there was no need to ever have a nuclear weapon. But unfortunately, the events of that time period, the actions by Japan in attacking Pearl Harbor, that was an attempt to destroy America. And, you know, that it was not going to come down to a truce. We had bombed Japan for like 83 days, firebomb. I'm sorry, I forget exactly how many. I think it's two months or something. We firebombed Japan every day and caused like 80,000 casualties in Japan, and they weren't even close to giving up. And we started to realize that if we were going to have to go into Japan with troops in order to make Japan capitulate, it would be a fight to the death, and there would literally be millions of people who died if that were to happen. And so dropping a nuclear bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki actually was the most loving thing that we could do for our own people and for the Japanese people. And I think most people just don't get that. It's a terrible, terrible, terrible thing to have to kill 250,000 people with 2 bombs. But is that worse than killing millions of people on both sides with years and years of suffering and fighting? Or is it better to just get it over with and finish the conflict, right? And I mean, I think some people just cannot bring themselves to have a clear-eyed understanding of what war is about, why war is necessary sometimes. I've heard my teachers used to say, you know, violence never solves anything. Well, that's not true. sometimes violence is the answer. Violence is the only answer sometimes in order to fix a problem. If you have a violent adversary who is hell-bent on destroying you, and so you have two choices. You can use violence to protect yourself, or you can die. You can be wiped out. And so those are the only two choices. And you see that over here when you come and you go through these battles and you see the kind of commitment that these guys had, just crawling through the sands of these, you know, volcanic islands, inch by inch, trying to clear out the resistance from the Japanese, because the Japanese would not give up. And I think the saddest thing that I saw yesterday is we went up to an escarpment here on the northern part of the island of Saipan. I'll get to your question in a second. And we get up to that escarpment, and at the end of the war, or I'm sorry, at the end of the battle here in Saipan, the US military had pushed the Japanese up to that northern point of the island, and they had nowhere else to go but into the sea. And the Japanese emperor got on the radio and told everybody, it's your duty for the glory of Japan to never be captured. That being captured is a dishonor to Japan. And therefore, all of those civilians and thousands of Japanese soldiers just chose to jump off those cliffs and commit suicide. And they said that at some points, there's two different cliffs, but one of them is a big escarpment, and they just jumped off of that and splatted on the ground or whatever. And then the other cliffs are right into the sea, and people were jumping off of both of them. And I guess there were so many bodies in the sea, they couldn't get boats out there. It was just mind-boggling to go look at that and to think. I wonder if there's ever been any country in history who has had more of its people commit suicide than the Japanese. Even today, the Japanese suicide rate is extremely high. I mean, just profanely high, especially for a country that's dying out. And if they really are a proud country, if they're proud of their culture, if they're proud of their history, then they should be doing everything they can to have as many babies as possible to preserve that history for posterity. But they're not. They're killing each other, killing themselves off. They're not killing each other off. They're killing themselves off at a rate that's orders of magnitude more than the suicide rate in the United States. And even our suicide rate in the United States is far too high. But when you think about the history of Japanese, where literally tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of Japanese jumped off of cliffs or swallowed a hand grenade or whatever in order to just end it instead of being captured by the Americans. Now, of course, they were propagandized that if they were captured by the Americans, that they would be raped and then eaten. So that certainly didn't help. But of course, none of that was true. And this is why I talk so much about it is so imperative that we seek truth, that we don't believe what our politicians are telling us. I don't care if you agree with your politician or not. We don't believe just right out of the bat whatever comes out of our tribe. We seek truth. And so that's what we're about here today. All right, folks, thank you very much for watching the podcast today. That was my rant after what we saw yesterday. And the video is going to blow your mind. It's so amazing. We're getting some really good stuff over here. And I've had some technical issues this morning with my notes and everything, but I'll do the best I can here. First of all, we'll start in Gaza, and we'll kind of do a round robin around what's going on in Israel and end up with Turkey. Okay, so stick around, because what I want to talk about is the real threat from Turkey against Israel and the United States. And so, I'll touch on it real quick, but I'll come back to it in more detail later. The Turks are, of course, behind the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad. They actually orchestrated all that with HTS, and they are now working their magic inside Syria to basically be able to control Syria and to have their own troops in Syria. And by having Turkish troops in Syria, by having air bases and things like that in Syria, what that does is that threatens Israel. And if Israel says, look, we're not going to allow threats on our borders, what happens when one of those threats happens to be a NATO ally? Because if Israel goes and strikes at Turkey, then Turkey could theoretically invoke Article 5 of NATO and have NATO troops fighting against Israel. So this presents a real conundrum for the United States. And so we're gonna talk about that in more detail in just a few minutes. But first, the IDF issued evacuation orders for a very large swath of Rafah. I talked about this yesterday. They directed civilians to relocate, and they are also making warnings for Beit Hanun and Beit Lahia up in the northern part of Gaza after there was more rocket fire that was fired toward Sderot. As I mentioned yesterday, there are probably only about 2,000 rockets left in Gaza, but that's still 2,000 rockets, and they're still a threat to Israel, and so they're going to have to keep coming after the Gazans and Palestinians there, and until they're done. Now, the Palestinians there's cracks showing inside Gaza. There are tribes in Gaza of Palestinians, basically large families who kind of, have a lot of sway. They have a lot of power, and they control stuff in their own areas of influence. Obviously, Hamas is over everything, and usually their goals are in alignment. So if these tribes want something to happen, Hamas is going to be okay with that because they're basically one and the same. They're on the same sheet of music, for example, for lack of a better term. And so since they're on the same sheet of music, it's not usually a problem. Well, it's becoming a problem because these guys are getting real fed up with what's going on in Gaza. And so they are starting to go around armed and threatening Hamas. So you may see some internecine fighting between Hamas and these tribes in Gaza. The problem is Israel can't tell the difference. If you see a guy walking around with a gun and you're looking at him from a drone, he's a guy walking around with a gun. And so Israel's probably going to be killing those guys as well. So probably not a good idea right now to be walking around Gaza with a gun. Okay, so question that's real dim today. When you mention U.S. nukes being the size of a Suburban, what are you referring to? Last I knew, the nukes are able to be carried by Air Force fighters. Are you talking about different ones? Yes, we are talking about different ones, Bill. The nukes that are in Incirlik Air Base in Turkey are in silos. Okay, so they're more like the gigantic Satan II missiles that the Russian have, in that they're probably more like 40 feet long and 8 feet, 12 feet in diameter, something like that. They're very, very large. Of course, that's not just the nuke, it's the nuke and the missile, the ballistic missile that carries it. The nuke itself these were made a long time ago. Okay, they've been around since the 80s. Okay, probably these particular nukes, and so they're not as miniaturized or as computerized as things that we might make today. And so what I've been told by people who know this stuff, whose job it is to maintain and secure those nukes, is that the nukes themselves are like the size of a Suburban and would take a very large convoy of trucks to get them out. We've got to get Incirlik is not on the coast. It's not right there on shore where we could just pull a ship up and load them on a ship. We'd have to truck them across Turkey. Everybody would know we were doing it, and Turkey would have a problem with it. So there's that. I'm going to move this over here now that it's getting a little lighter. I don't need quite as much light. We're at this great resort in Saipan today. Saipan is a very interesting place. It's a small island. Very small. There's an island off the coast of Panama that's called Coiba Island that I've been writing history about, or doing research for a book about, for many years. And this island is about like a third the size of the island of Coiba. And that surprised me. It's like basically a large stationary aircraft carrier. Now, there's not a lot of military presence here on Saipan, but Tinian, just next door, which is right back there, actually, when the sun comes up, you'll be able to see Tinian right offshore. It's about 3 miles across there. We're going to fly over there this morning. Tinian has a large military presence, and so does Guam. So it is just interesting to be here, talk to the expats. You'll see in the video that I made, there's some really amazing things about Saipan. So, Chuck, can you clarify why Turkey would be upset? Is that a sort of security blanket for them? Well, it would show that the United States is cutting ties with Turkey, and Turkey wouldn't like that. Erdogan would see kind of his trump card, literally, maybe being taken away if we were to do that, and he would not be okay with that. That would not be cool for Erdogan, because here's the problem. We allowed Turkey to become a NATO ally before Erdogan was president, when Turkey really was an ally. But, sorry, I'm messing with my camera here. However, when Erdogan took over, and then really it started this shift toward the Muslim Brotherhood, well, then it became a big problem, because now Turkey's kind of got us by the cojones, you know what I mean? Like, they have the ability as a member of NATO to invoke Article 5 if they get attacked, but they, like I said, Israel might be the one attacking them, and then we got a real problem. Now, we're not 100%, we would be obligated under our treaty to help them in the case that they invoke Article 5, but we don't have to do it. We could refuse for various reasons. And so would it apply if someone's attacked in self-defense? No, it's only a defensive organization. NATO is not an offensive organization. What I keep saying about the war in Ukraine, making Ukraine an ally, a NATO ally, would not necessitate NATO forces going into Russia. We have never and will never be a threat to the Russian mainland. The only fighting that would be done, if that were to happen, would be in Ukraine, and that would be to push the Russians out of Ukraine. That would be the whole point of it. Or, of course, if Russia decides to move into Poland, if Russia decides to move into Lithuania or someplace like that, then we would fight in those countries to eject Russia, but not go further into Russia. It's not an offensive organization. NATO is a purely defensive structure and a standards structure in order to sort of standardize all of the equipment that our militaries use. All right? Does that make sense? Now, Mrs. Tomlin's taking it to him. All right. Military operations in Gaza, we got that. There was another targeted strike in Lebanon yesterday where they took out a guy named Hassan Bader. He's a Hezbollah operative that was linked to Iran's Quds Force. Yes. Uh, and he was coordinating an imminent attack led by Hamas on Israeli civilians. In other places around the world, I believe, from what I read, this was actually not an attack in Israel. It was an attack on Israelis elsewhere. So that's a important attack. It was in Cyprus, okay, is where, and they were going to attack an Israeli commercial passenger plane sometime in the immediate future. So this bombing in Beirut likely saved the lives of a whole plane load of people, many of them Israeli, from Cyprus. And that's something that obviously is a huge concern, because just because we bomb this guy doesn't necessarily mean they turn that thing off either. And I think that this is one of the reasons why El Al Airlines, the Israeli airline, is so strict on their security. I don't even like to fly with them because they're just a pain. They make it hard, and they have to make it hard because of this. And this is the thing, you know, I was in Afghanistan one time, and I was out with the special forces on the border with Iran, and they took over this little village, and they were going through looking for bomb makers and stuff. And there was a guy in the village that was not telling the truth, and they were able to cross-reference what he said and figure out that he was not telling the truth. And so one of these special forces guys took him in a back room and just started bouncing him off the walls, just bing, 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 bouncing him off the walls, this big special forces dude. And I'm standing there and I'm like, should I be watching this? And he goes, you got a problem with this? And I said, you know what? I'm going to think of this guy every time I go through the security line at the airport, because this is the reason why we have to go through security lines at the airport, because you got jackasses like these guys who think it's fun to go around and just murder civilians and just to create terror, just to try to get some stupid political or religious point across. And because of that, all of us suffer. And it causes massive financial, economic, social friction because of these idiots who go around thinking that the best way to get people to notice them is to, try to blow something up. You know, it's just these guys that their mommy didn't hug them enough when they were a kid or something. And it really bugs me for sure. Okay, I got to hurry. I got to hurry through this. I only have a few more minutes. So the Houthis fired another ballistic missile from Yemen. The United States shot this one down over Saudi Arabia. The Houthis claimed again that they've sunk the Harry Truman and for the 19th time, and that they have shot down the 16th U.S. MQ-9 Reaper drone. Of course, the Houthis, not real educated, and so they're probably not very good at math. And so they're like, yeah, 1, 2, 16. Yeah, we got 16 of those things. They claim to shoot down U.S. Reaper drones on a weekly, if not daily basis. And most of those, some of them, they may actually be true. They may have actually shot down some Reapers. Reapers are a little slower than a fast mover, right? And so it could happen. But the Houthis, and with this sort of dust up, if you go back and watch my live yesterday about the conflict between the United States and Iran, the Houthis are all just like, yeah, this is just us. We're just doing this because we're standing in solidarity with our brothers in Gaza. Okay, well, you go right ahead, and we're going to make you look like Gaza. But the Iranians are saying, hey, we don't have anything to do with this. Just the fact that they're shooting Iranian weapons at Israel with Iranian help in targeting, there's that. This is why I really do believe that we're going to probably see some sort of military action against Iran in the near future. And hope not. I hope they can come to the negotiating table and figure something out. Iran obviously doesn't want it, but there's a very good chance that we will see that coming shortly. Now, Israel is about to build the wall. So the wall that we're talking about is with Jordan. They already have a wall, or had a wall, do have a wall around Gaza. I've been to that wall, and it is substantial, but not substantial enough, apparently. Um, they decided to build a $1.4 billion border fence with Jordan because the fence with Jordan is basically just a double layer chain link fence. And they just have a lot of problems with smuggling, especially with weapons smuggling coming across that fence. It's fairly easy to do. You can go toss weapons over that fence all day long. And they don't have enough people to patrol the whole thing because they have a long border with Jordan all the way down the Jordan River Valley. So the Israelis have decided, okay, it's time to beef up our border security with Jordan. And so they're going to start that shortly. Now, Egypt continues to build up forces in Sinai. That's probably something we're going to have to do a full live about later. But they are increasing their military presence in the Sinai Peninsula, and they're exceeding the limits that are set out by the peace agreement with Israel. This buildup includes deploying forces beyond the permitted quota, and that's a problem. But then the bigger problem is that they are also expanding port facilities and extending airport runways in excess of what is allowed under the peace treaty in the Sinai. So, I mean, the Israelis, of course, troops in the region is one thing. They can be pretty easily taken back and reversed, but the extending runways and port facilities and stuff, that can't be easily reversed. So the Israelis have filed a complaint with Egypt over this and say that they are committed to maintaining the peace agreement, but they've made it clear they're not going to tolerate violations like this from Cairo. So there is an implicit threat there from Israel that they may cause some kinetic problems for Egypt in the near future if that doesn't happen. And, in reality, Egypt has a large army, but they're no match at all for Israel. That's, again, I could do a whole podcast on that, and we've talked about it in the past, but we can do that sometime in the future. Couldn't Jordan just take a page from Hamas playbook and dig tunnels into Israel? Wouldn't surprise me if there already are. The problem is, if you go out there and you look at that border, there's kind of a no man's land on the Jordanian side and on the Israeli side, because that border is out in the desert. And so it's not like it would be a super long tunnel. It would be, I'm fairly certain that there are a few, but it would be easy for Israel to notice that they were being dug on the Jordanian side, because they have to do something with all the dirt from the tunnels, and they would see them pulling them out. There are no structures anywhere near the border, and the topography is very extreme, let's just say. Big gullies and washouts and canyons and stuff like that on that border. So it would not be as easy as it would be between the United States and Mexico, where they can take a Mexican house that's right on the border and go through the basement and then come up in an American house on this right up against the border. We're talking about miles of open area with big canyons and stuff that they'd have to go through. So it'd be pretty difficult to do. Do they have tacos in Guam? I have not eaten any tacos. Well, no, in Guam they do. Yeah, we had some fantastic tacos in Guam, but not here on Saipan. So now I got to get to Turkey because I'm in a big hurry. I've got to be rolling out here in just a few minutes to go to the airport. But as I said, the Turks have been quietly establishing. So two things. First of all, they've been pushing HTS to make a peace deal with Israel. And you might say, well, that sounds like a good thing. I mean, the normalization of relations between Syria and Israel has been a thing in the past, and it could be a thing in the future. And of course, everybody wants peace. So we don't want them to be in conflict with Syria, but HTS is not a trustworthy organization that we should that the Israelis would, really want to do business with. I'm trying to turn my light up a little bit. So with that in mind, uh, HTS making overtures toward Israel, like, hey, we want to leave you alone, you leave us alone. Well, that's one thing, except when you see that it's coming from Turkey. And that's because Turkey is looking to move forces into Syria and establish air bases there. Now, Turkey could strike at Israel from Turkey. They're close enough that they've got aircraft that could do that. But um, it would be difficult. It would require mid-air refueling most likely, and they could see them coming some time in advance, and so they'd know they'd have the ability to prepare. If Turkey gets air bases much closer to Israel, that cuts the time, the warning time that Israel would have if Turkey wanted to launch a strike on Israel to minutes. And that would be a big problem. And I don't think Israel would go for that. Here's the problem, though. We really don't want to see a military conflict directly between Turkey and Israel because they both have American weapons. And you don't want to have F-16s going up against F-35s. Nobody's going to want to see our allies, two of our allies fighting each other, because then what do we do with that? And again, Turkey is not our ally, but on paper they are, and that's the problem we have. That's kind of the crux of the matter. Are any of our allies? Gosh, this keeps going away. Are any of our allies pitching in on the Iran nuke disarmament situation? If not, shouldn't they? Iran having nukes is bad for that region. Are any of our allies? Yeah. Okay. So I think I understand your question. Are any of our allies helping with countering Iran's nuclear ambitions? The answer to that question is yes. There are other NATO countries. Great Britain is helping. France has been over there. I think even Spain has had something over there, but in the recent future, those have been mostly dedicated towards countering the Houthi threat, but all of them would definitely be on our team in countering Iran. I don't know if that answers your question, but the security at Ben Gurion is second to none. Yeah, second to none, and make you want to drive your car into a bridge abutment because you get gate raped every time you go through there. And I mean, it's bad. And the weirdest thing is that security getting out of Israel is many times worse than the security getting in. Worse as in more difficult to pass through. And I'm not sure why that is, but yeah, Israeli security is legendary, and it is nothing to sneeze at, that's for sure. All right, folks, I'm going to have to get going here because I've got a plane to catch over to Tinian, right over there. So from the island of Saipan, where I am today, stay tuned because we have a ton of really great content coming. And it's, again, going to be going up first at chuckholton.com. So you're going to want to go over there and subscribe on our locals page. That kind of helps us future-proof the channel away from YouTube in case YouTube goes away or makes us go away. We're not as reliant on YouTube, and that's very helpful. Also, you're going to want to go to just check out the new documentaries that we have coming out over there, the books that are available over there, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to be giving away 10 of my new book, Death of Civilization, over the next week. I think Miss Tomlet can put up the details for that in the chat. And so you're going to want to, that's for new subscribers, or new supporters over at chuckholton.com. We'll be giving away some hard copies of the books signed by yours truly. So those will be out there before too long. There was one other thing. We also have a $10 off the annual subscription over at chuckholton.com. If you want to get it, it's on sale, so get it quick. All right. Thank you very much for watching. We got to run. We'll see you again when we see you. Take care.